am I doing the intro because I like this album?
Yeah, you do the intro.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the bassist from Lipstick.
And hi, I'm Greg. I'm the vocalist from Lipstick.
And today we're changing things up and talking about a band that I like. We're with our good friend Stephen Edwards from Eye for None, formerly of Blue Matches until he left us. Steve! Welcome to the show, Steve. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So the format of the show, if you've not listened before, is that we go through something and we put it in ascending order of greatness. Historically, it's been Kiss records mostly, so we've been putting them in ascending order of pretty okayness. But now we're pivoting to Smashing Pumpkins. This is an album that I absolutely love and have listened to many times, and then forced Greg to listen to. To Greg's credit, he is much more dedicated than I am, in that every one of these Kiss albums I listened to one time, 12 hours before we recorded, and he's been listening to this album pretty frequently for about a month now. That's why he was so upset in that last episode when he talked about, I'm going to book guests for this, Steve, because he wants to stop listening to Gish.
In fairness, I've been listening to this album for more than a month, Steve, because we've been talking about this for a while. We've been talking about this since December, about doing Gish.
Yep.
So this has been a long time coming. So what we typically do at the start of the episode is we go around the panel, talk about our history with the band or whatever we're talking with. I don't have that much Smashing Pumpkins history. I'm not an alt-rock fan. I grew up in the 90s, and listening to the radio, I just assumed music was bad because everything I heard on the radio I thought was terrible. Nirvana, nu metal, boy bands, that was the era I grew up as, wow, why do people like music? Music is terrible.
This breaks my heart.
But,
right?
But, to Steve's credit, he had me borrow Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, and it was great. I loved it. I'm like, yes, this is a great album. And I really liked the James E. Haas side project he did, Tinted Windows. That was a really good band. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe Smashing Pumpkins is my gateway band into alt-rock. I'll appreciate it more. And so I was really excited to listen to Gish. Yes, I love Tinted Windows. I love Melancholy. This is going to be great. I was very disappointed in this album. This reinforced a lot of the negative stereotypes I have about the genre. I didn't care for it much at all. But to their credit, I'm wearing my Thin Lizzy shirt today. Thin Lizzy's first two albums were pretty awful. And I love that band. They're one of my top 3 favorite bands. And if even Thin Lizzy can have a bad first album, I'm going to give Smashing Pumpkins some credit because I know they get very good. And Melancholy is great. And there are some good moments on this album. So I'm, mixed feelings overall, but not completely without merit. Steve, who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. I am actually a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan. I guess that's why I'm here. I will be honest, though. I was a little disappointed when I found out we were talking about Gish, as opposed... I like Gish, but I guess this is a sort of a spoiler, but I think that every song, any of the songs on either Siamese or Melancholy are better than the best song on Gish. But it's sort of a progress that they go in, and I guess we'll get into it more, that I feel like Billy Corgan didn't really hit his writing stride until it got to Siamese Dream. But yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of the 90s. Alternative rock is kind of my main thing. I grew up a little bit more getting into punk and pop punk, but the grunge was probably the first kind of thing I got introduced to. I was sort of a little bit later with Smashing Pumpkins, in that when I was a kid, I was getting into grungier bands like Nirvana and Bush. Smashing Pumpkins didn't really come on until a few years later. I didn't really get a full appreciation of them until I was an adult. But I don't really completely consider them a grunge band either. They're sort of the outlier band of all those, as to where you have your Nirvana, your Pearl Jam, and then you have a little bit of your more metal side with Alice in Chains. You have a little bit more of, I think, your psychedelic experimental side with Smashing Pumpkins. But I still love them, though. That's my introduction.
Well, the general wisdom is that the core trio of alt rockers in the early 90s was Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, and Pearl Jam, right? With after Nirvana, well, we'll say broke up, then it sort of became a split of what alt rock was to become, and the Smashing Pumpkins opted for turning it into elaborate art rock psychedelic, and Pearl Jam sort of kept the, jammy, grungy music direction going.
Well, I wouldn't say that was after Nirvana, because
It's true.
Because Gish came out in '91, and that was when Nevermind came out in '92.
92.
So they were a little bit ahead of that, and they'd already gained some popularity off of their first album, Smashing Pumpkins. They were on a major label with their first album.
Yeah, what the bands themselves actually meant to do versus how history will interpret it, I think history interprets it as those three bands are pretty tightly connected as the vanguards of alt-rock, even if they basically had nothing to do with each other.
You don't consider, Soundgarden and Alice in Chains? They're obviously two of the...
Yeah,
the big
see,
ones.
from the outside perspective, the trinity I always heard was Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains as, the trinity of grunge. And then when you're talking about the 90s in general, when you just make the broader discussion alt-rock, that's when you start to bring in Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple Pilots, bands like that, is where that all sort of fits together. But when we're talking about trinities associated with each other, I've always heard Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. Smashing Pumpkins was always a bit of an outlier band.
Yeah,
still very huge, but not necessarily in that trinity.
Well,
as grunge, they're absolutely an outlier because they're very little like a grunge band.
Well, and if you're talking about height of popularity, obviously, I think Smashing Pumpkins had a lot more popularity at their very biggest point than Soundgarden.
Right. And also, Smashing Pumpkins is a much better band than all those other bands. The other bands are boring.
Oh no, I don't agree with that.
I definitely disagree especially when you're talking Soundgarden.
Yeah,
Soundgarden they are an excellent band.
I think Soundgarden's probably technically the musicianship wise the best band of anyone we've mentioned today.
Big Dumb Sex is an okay song.
I've often said that the main point of Hunger Strike was to show how much better of a vocalist Chris Cornell was than why am I spacing on his name? Eddie Vedder, yeah.
Eddie Vedder, though.
Eddie Vedder's great. Eddie Vedder's perfect for Pearl Jam. When you put him in a room with Chris Cornell and have Chris Cornell just I don't mind stealing bread. Eddie Vedder just doesn't sound good.
Well, Eddie Vedder has a completely different style. I've never really considered him to have a lot of melody so much. It's a more interesting thing going on with him. I've never been a huge Pearl Jam fan, but I respect them. I respect all those bands, honestly. When you're talking about musicianship, out of all those bands, Nirvana is probably the worst of them, but I still love Nirvana.
Yeah. We sort of got off a topic. So my history with Smashing Pumpkins is basically take Steve's history and move it 20 degrees north. We were both born within, 10 days of each other? Yeah, I think you're 10 days younger than me.
Old, yeah.
I'm so old. Old man Steve, they call me.
Yeah.
Versus young man Steve, they call him.
That's the
young man Steve. And we both grew up in rural parts of the country. I grew up in rural Wisconsin. He grew up in rural Tennessee. And so I was listening to the same sort of. I grew up on the '90s alt rock and grunge and all that stuff. And Smashing Pumpkins has long been one of my favorite bands. I think I first heard probably one or two songs from Siamese Dream on the radio and enjoyed them a lot. And then my dad or my brother picked up a copy of Melancholy and tossed that in the car CD player at some point. And that was when I fell in love with this band and began accumulating their CDs. So ironically, Gish, their first album, that's one that I didn't get until probably I'd been listening to the band for 5 or 6 years by that point.
Yeah, so my question is, did you get into Melancholy when it first came out in '95 then? Because I think I was too young to appreciate it.
I think my family mostly bought used music, so it probably would have been closer to 97 or 98 by the time we picked that one up.
So, yeah. Because in '95, this is telling our age, but we would have both been 10 years old, so I think that, I don't think I would have completely understood it.
I would have been 5 years old.
Right?
Yeah, I probably would have been somewhat bored with it. I don't know. It's hard to tell how you would.
Maybe that's why I don't appreciate alt rock, because I grew up with it younger than you guys. This music is so boring.
Well, exactly. So my parents, when the youngest I can remember, they listened to country music, and I remember when I was hitting around 6, 7, maybe 8 years old, that's when I started listening to a lot of rock on the radio, and that's when '94 I got really into Green Day and Bush and other things like Dave Matthews Band and even Alanis Morissette, just all the really popular 90s stuff. So that stayed with me, and I feel like it's sort of a psychological thing that's ingrained in you. When you hear something as a kid and you really connect with it, it's hard to break out of that when you grow up as an adult. And that's why so many 90s babies are obsessed with everything that is 90s, everything that's... Where are you going?
I'm just checking the microphones. There was just a paranoid part of me thought that I had forgotten to hit record. Sorry.
Does this make your recording?
This is the example of the things I get to edit.
Right?
Thanks, Steve.
No,
Sorry.
Keep this in. This is the realness. This is live.
Sorry.
We were just talking about earlier about how grumpy I was getting with all the editing I had to do. Fine, we're leaving it in.
Leave it.
Continue.
Leave it. This is real.
This is real and raw, especially the part where I'm off mic explaining what I'm doing.
Yeah.
The audience will never know unless they listen really closely, maybe.
Keeping it real and raw like those grunge bands in the 90s.
Yeah.
But see, I think that this is part of the issue where I said that I was a little disappointed to be talking about Gish. I've already sort of been steering the conversation away from Gish. So maybe we should get into that.
We'll have you back for the Monuments episode.
Okay. Monuments of an Elegy?
Yeah.
Are you really gonna do that? That's the
Yeah, well, we're doing the whole thing. We're doing all the Kiss albums, and I'm gonna make Greg do all of the Smashing Pumpkins albums.
Okay.
What do you think? Should we do Euphoria and Earphoria and Pieces Iscariot?
I don't even know what the Pieces of what is that?
Pieces Iscariot is the B-sides album that came after Siamese Dream.
No.
And Euphoria is the other B-sides album that came after Siamese
So does that mean I get to have you listen to the box set and the unreleased demos?
I've heard a lot of the unreleased stuff, yeah. But.
Ooh, you mean the unreleased demos that you definitely don't have because you don't have $2,000 to buy the Gene Simmons vault?
No, I have the reasonably priced Kiss box set that was like $80 for 5 CDs.
Okay.
The one that's like fair market value.
Billy Corgan should do a vault where it's just you just go in and he's just like grumpy to your face. He's like, nah, and you just hand him a $20 bill. And he's like, all right, leave.
And he lectures everybody about pro wrestling.
I mean, based upon his current draw, that's probably fair market value for a meet and greet.
Are we talking about like all things Smashing Pumpkins as well? Because I mean, I find Billy a really interesting guy.
Yeah.
Because I think he's the term gets thrown around too much, but I do kind of think he's a musical genius. Because I've seen so many interviews with him, and he talks about how he doesn't read music, but he taught himself how to play piano. And if you've ever seen any videos of him playing piano around like the melancholy days, like right after he started learning, he has the weirdest like technique, but he's really good, and it just shows you that he just did it by ear, really.
Interesting.
But
and like all of the greats of that era, all of his songs are secretly about Courtney Love, so she's the real genius behind all of alt rock in the 90s.
Hey, that's my girl, okay?
Right?
Yeah, that's and then there's the rumor, which is probably true, that he wrote a lot of her stuff. Kurt Cobain had like ghostwritten many of her songs. Then after he passed, like Billy Corgan apparently had a lot to do with Celebrity Skin, so he wrote lots of her stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anyway, I'm done.
I'm trying to refrain my snarky comments. So this is how you feel on all the Kiss episodes.
No,
Yeah,
be snarky.
But
It's
at least to my credit, I admit when Kiss is terrible. Like when we were talking about this before the episode, Steve was saying, well, it's maybe better that you can't read how bad the lyrics are in this album. Like, no, that's not an excuse for not writing better lyrics. Like, I will tell you when Kiss is terrible, and I will tell you when they're great.
No, I will.
You can't read or something.
No,
I will.
was trying to say that the lyrics on this album are bad, and it's better that there's not a lyric booklet so you can't read how bad they are. I'm like, no, just write better lyrics.
So here's my I've got 100% a justification for these lyrics are bad, and the fact that you have no idea what they are because he's mumbling and he's low in the mix is 100% to the benefit, and because he didn't release a lyric sheet. It's absolutely to the benefit of the music. So as I started listening to this music as an angsty, middle class white kid in middle school or high school, like he's angry, he's upset about something. He's young and he's full of piss and vinegar and he's angry about something, and me too. And if I could actually tell what he was angry about, I wouldn't have been able to identify with it. I'd be like, I mean,
he could have just written about universal lyrical themes like your parents being, mean to you, or your school sucking, or being in the middle of nowhere. Could have just written about themes that you relate to as opposed to just writing bad lyrics.
I mean, he did. It's just he wrote it in a more vague way. He distinctly has songs about, I hate my dad. And those are not among his greatest.
Well, I mean, that's the grunge thing, really. I mean, that's the one thing they mostly have in common is the vagueness, I think.
Yep.
Between any other...
And everybody hating their dads.
Well, yeah.
I mean, the more explicit you are
I
about
hate
it...
his dad. I don't know anything about his dad, but
one of the last song
Dads
in
are
Pieces,
jerks.
the last song in Pieces is scary. It is fairly explicit that apparently his dad beat him a little bit. So,
I don't know anything about that.
right? That's how alt rock tended to work. Was lots of vague lyrics, mostly about how much you hate your parents. And I found as alt rock got more explicit about being mad at your parents, it was harder and harder to take seriously. Like what was their name? Stained. That song about how much they hate their parents.
that's the only good song Stain ever made.
Wow, really? Ooh, harsh.
I like that song. You like Stain? You're a huge Stain fan?
No. Skillet Skillet was an electronic Christian alt rock band for a long time, and then they sort of pivoted to more generic mainstream alt rock and released a song about how much they hate their dads. And I was like, oh, this really sucks now.
I don't know. To me, that just seems like an excuse for just not writing better lyrics. Like, oh, it's vague and you don't understand it. Like, it screams pretentious. I feel if you're listening to a song as a listener, I want to be able to gravitate towards the lyrics, understand them. I'm not against, thinking and digging deeper and extra layers. I'm fine with that, but I think you need to be at least able to understand what the song is about on a listen.
Well, on Gish, there's not even a lot of lyrics on it, honestly. There's many things are repeated, and then there's lots of songs where they're just not a whole lot of vocals.
Well, let's get into this album and our ranking coming in at, and also no ties with this, which is refreshing.
Less math that way.
Less math is great. Coming in at last place as the worst song. No, sorry,
the least best song.
the least best. The 11th best song on Gish, Window Pane. I don't remember what this one sounds like. Help me out.
Did you vote for this one last too? I did.
I put the second to last.
Okay.
I put the second to last too. I don't remember what it sounds like.
Window pane.
Okay, it has a cool drum roll at the very end of it. Other than that, it's completely forgettable.
How did you guys get good at writing songs listening to this?
We listened to other stuff too.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about this album, and this is why you don't like it, is there aren't any hooks on this album. That's the
problem.
And that's the hard part about it for me. The hardest part about this record for me, even though I like a lot of the songs, is that a lot of them drone on for longer than they should, and that can be said about many Smashing Pumpkins songs. I feel like at a certain point, it's like we get the idea. Like you're just being repetitive.
Yep.
And that's sort of this song. That's a big.
I put this one and Crush as my last two, and it's basically the same complaint with both of them. Is that they're slow. They take forever to build to where they're trying to get to, and where they're trying to get to isn't anywhere particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Just the difference is I feel like the vocal melody in Window Pane is a little catchier of the two.
Just a lot of these melodies I don't find to be particularly catchy.
They're not.
And
I mean,
all right, cool. So I'm not
No,
crazy.
they're not.
Because
No.
I feel like I'm being a jerk. Where I'm just like, oh, this just isn't very catchy or very hooky. My favorite band is the Beatles, so I'm coming from the Beatles to Smashing Pumpkins, a band that's like hooks nonstop all the time, versus no hooks anywhere to be found for 40 minutes.
If we're going from the grunge thing, that's sort of what I was describing with Eddie Vedder. I feel like many Pearl Jam songs aren't hooky at all. Like they don't have strong hooks. So that's sort of the idea behind this decade.
Alt rock was a rebellion against arena rock, and arena rock was all about. We've discussed this. Greg and I have had this conversation several times, where alt rock was, kicking back against arena rock, and arena rock was about a big, it's indulgent spectacle and catchy, poppy, hooky music. And so they rebelled against all of it, including, catchiness sometimes.
Which I feel, which we've talked about off mic, is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I have no problem with ditching the dumb lyrics of the 80s. Get rid of that garbage. Change the guitar tone, sure, whatever. But why'd you have to get rid of hooks, too? Could you have left in hooks?
More like throw the baby boomer out with the bathwater. Hey! Millennials, hashtag.
All right. I have nothing to add. Are we going to the next one?
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything relevant? Yeah, window pane is... sorry.
It's forgettable.
Boring.
Yeah,
Like this
window
Nets
pane is
song,
pretty forgettable.
Crush.
Yep, all right. So,
I actually had Crush pretty, I guess about mid-level on mine.
Yeah, so the point values, I voted it as my last place. Steve voted it as his last place. You voted it number 7, so it got 9 points total. 7 of them yours.
wait, where was window pane if both of us voted it for it to be last?
Window pane, he voted window pane lower. Thus,
I
Matt.
voted
Okay.
last, yeah.
Okay.
So, Crush, I don't know. Crush is... It's kind of bland.
What did that one sound like? I've listened to the CD like 6 times. I
doesn't
don't
have
remember most of these songs.
Yeah, I had to... So, one of the difficulties I've always had with the Smashing Pumpkins is there's often little correlation between the title of the song in the CD jacket and anything that happens in the song. I feel like a lot of it's following Cockney rhyming scheme for no reason, or something similar to Cockney rhyming scheme, like Hummer, which the big hook of that is the word bummer, and Tristessa, which I'm pretty sure he's singing Fritessa. But yeah, so like I went through, and to make sure that I remembered which song was which, I wrote down like the major hook that I remember
I have
from
a
each
hard
song.
time with names as well. Like, even I've listened to this album for years, and this was the first time I really went through, and I was like, I need to try to remember the names.
Yeah, which one's Snail?
I'm actually having trouble with this as well. Like,
Right.
I don't understand how this is good.
So I wrote-
don't understand this. If you don't remember the name of the song, how is it a good song?
Because it's album-oriented rock. You listen to the entire album as an experience.
Right, but I listened to a Thin Lizzy album. I know the names of the songs on there. I know which song is Cowboy Song.
Of course you know which song is Cowboy Song.
Because it's great, and it has hooks, and I remember it.
But-
and they never say Cowboy Song in the song.
So every
you just
time-
know it's Cowboy Song.
I've been singing about being a cowboy. Every time we do one
Right,
of
because
these...
you can understand what the song's about. That's the point, Steve.
That's Crush.
Yeah. I wrote down no memorable
Yeah.
hooks.
Just it's the song that goes.
Wait,
it's
which
every
song is that?
Okay, so here's the trick.
And you thought Rock and Roll Over was too samey?
Here's the trick with the album-oriented rock. How many episodes of Kiss have we done where at least one member of the panel said, "Oh yeah, this one's a skip every time"?
Right, but that's...
How many songs on Gish do you skip when you listen to it?
I don't know.
Like
I don't really.
I don't skip any
Yeah, I
of them.
probably don't skip.
Right. It's you listen to the whole album all at once, and the whole like, oh, I don't like this song. Let's just skip to the next
But-
one. That's not really.
But Gish
Part of
sort
it.
of becomes one of those more background albums. Like, it's
Yeah.
not one that I put it on if I'm like doing a long drive or something. I don't really put it on and go, like, I really want to listen to Smashing Pumpkins. I'm going to listen to all of Gish.
Right.
Well, I guess that's... So you're... Just so I'm clear on this. You'd rather have an album with 10 mediocre songs versus an album with, like, here's 8 really good ones and 2 I'm so-so on, so I skip. Because that's basically what the Kiss panelists were saying. Like, I like everything, but these 2 are just okay, and I skip them.
I mean, nowadays that's less of the way that one listens to music. But like, if the goal of the album itself is to be an album to be experienced as a whole, I mean, that's a valid form of artistic expression.
Put it like this. Gish in 91 makes perfect sense. If you were to release Gish now, no one will listen to it.
Oh yeah, this would be a terrible album to release right now.
And well, not only because it's rock, because rock music really is completely falling into just like a niche category, and as of a whole. But we're, like we were saying earlier, we're singles driven now, so everything's got to be like, oh, this is a great standalone song.
Yeah.
And there's no song on this whole album that's a great standalone song.
Even by 90s standards.
But to me, that's a problem. I feel you can have an album that's an experience, but you should still have standout cuts on an experience, in my opinion. To me, that just shows weak songwriting.
It's possible. I mean, as you were saying, this may not have been Billy at his best.
This is my least favorite of the Yeehaw era, and I say James Yeehaw because
he is the saving grace on this album. Without him, this album would have almost no redeeming quality.
Well, you
for
say
me.
that, but I'm not convinced that him or Darcy really even had much to do with this album either. I don't really think they did. Now,
I think Darcy was still recording her parts on this album.
well, it's okay. So,
And I think Yeehaw, his leads are what saves it for me. A lot of his lead parts are very interesting and melodic,
that's
and I
probably
gravitate towards
Billy,
that.
though. That's,
Well, then, hey, he was good at something. Good for him.
I mean,
Whoever did the leads on this album was great.
I believe the consensus is by Siamese Dream. He was total control freak mode. Darcy basically didn't record a note anymore.
no,
It was
Yeehaw didn't really record almost. I don't think he recorded anything on Siamese either. So what I understand of the history is Siamese Dream. Billy became obsessed. He did everything but the drums, like everything. For Melancholy, the band rebelled against that, and they actually all did record. And I think that's why Melancholy is so good, is because it was the one time where they all came together.
right. I've often said that I feel like, now I've been saying this for a decade or more now, that the big thing that Billy Corgan needs is he needs James Yeehaw or somebody equivalent to him saying, "No, Billy, that's a bad idea." I guess now, no, William, that's a bad idea.
No, he's back to Billy now.
Oh, is he back to Billy? No, he's touring his.
He
He's
needs-
touring his
No,
WPC
he's
right
over-
now.
No, well, the WPC thing I think is over because now they're working for the reunion tour,
The quote unquote reunion tour.
which I'm excited about. I got my tickets the day it went on sale, like within the first hour.
Oh yeah.
So I guess you didn't.
I did not. I feel like it's really dishonest to say, "Hey, we're doing a reunion tour with some random studio bassist."
Well, it's not random though. That he's the guy who's been playing lead guitar with Billy for 10 years.
And, dude, like, reunion tours don't always feature the original lineup. It features the members you care about.
I care about
Darcy.
I care about Darcy, or at least Melissa Oftermar.
Well, and she would have been a great to have. Well, I don't know why they didn't try. He didn't try to
Right?
get
I mean,
her.
if they absolutely could not reconcile with Darcy, they could have gotten Melissa.
She probably just didn't want to do it either. But
Does she not want to make money?
But Nicole, who played bass with him during the Oceana time frame, was amazing as well. So I think for him it comes down to he has a really good working. I can't remember the guy's name. He has a really good working relationship with him, and those Billy and that guy were basically the only two that did Elegy.
Okay.
So I think that's why he's included.
I have trouble keeping track of who was doing what post breakup because the very first lineup that was announced was like, oh, okay, you put together a new band that's you and Jimmy Chamberlain and somebody who looks like Darcy and somebody who looks like James Yeehaw, but aren't those people.
Well, that's important. Well, and that's why I said out of the Yeehaw era earlier, because you've got your first 5 albums really, but Jimmy Chamberlain was gone for a little bit, and then Darcy left at the
end of
2000.
Machina.
Yeah,
I think they were finishing recording it.
but I don't really think she recorded anything on the album anyway.
No, I mean, no, that was all Billy.
So does Billy get a better rhythm section eventually? Because
This
Jimmy-
is blasphemy.
Yeah, like
this is honestly, when people complain about the Van Halen rhythm section being repetitive, this is honestly one of the worst rock rhythm sections I've ever heard.
I
You're
mean,
gonna
yeah,
be
like-
this
destroyed
album.
for this.
yeah, right. Like all the Smashing Pumpkins fans are going to be mad. They love Jimmy.
Jimmy Chamberlain is like, people put him highest regard of any drummers. Like he's like,
Maybe he's great, but on this
he's like
album he
top
was
10
awful.
Yeah.
drummers.
I mean, he's a little bit repetitive in this one. Let's be honest. His he plays the same beats a lot, but yeah, I think once he got to touring and was
So maybe it's a problem with the songs being very repetitive. But listening to just this album, there is nothing spectacular about the rhythm section in this band. They just strike me as very bland and holding the band back. At least hearing what I'm hearing on this album. Without the context of the other albums, I've only heard Melancholy, which I enjoy quite a bit. But without any other contents, looking at this in isolation, like, man, this is a bad rhythm section.
I completely disagree. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad at all. Darcy's not an amazing bass player. No, she's just very standard.
Yeah.
But
she sort of like helped establish that standard of, all right, disaffected, mediocre, tall, skinny girl. You're on bass.
Right, but I'm talking more about the technique, the parts
Jimmy
being played.
Chamberlain, though. Here's the thing: like, I've always heard people say amazing things about Jimmy Chamberlain, and I would listen to the records, but he sounds like a good drummer. It wasn't until I had ever watched anything with Pumpkins without Jimmy Chamberlain that you really realize, like, even if their drummer at the time is amazing, like, it's just not the same. Like, Jimmy Chamberlain is just incredible.
Well, it's like people who would, no one says that Alex Van Halen is a bad drummer, but people complain about how repetitive of a drummer he is. And so maybe he's not necessarily a bad drummer, but at least on this album, he's fallen into the repetition too much where it's very uninteresting as a listener.
But I think we've already covered that. I think the album in general is repetitive. So
I guess I'm just reiterating. I think if the rhythm section changed it up more, I think this actually would be a much more dynamic and interesting album. I think the problem, a lot of it, is that the rhythm section seems to go on autopilot for a big chunk of it.
But how much of it is that, and how much of it is that Billy wouldn't let them, and he needs his moment
It's
to
possible.
shine.
It's like, no, this is how the song goes. You
Yeah.
have to play it that way. That's why it's very refreshing being in a band with Steve, who will tell me when my ideas suck. And I will tell him when his ideas suck. And that's why it's great to work together.
Aw. Also, I mean, this was their first album. I don't think they weren't working with much of a budget. So I don't think they had a lot of time to go into the studio and be like, hey, let's change up our songs a little bit. They were probably doing something pretty similar to what they had been doing live.
I'm sure, yeah.
Right.
Well, and that was
So everybody did what they did live, except for Billy, who was like, hold on, let me layer on about 39 more guitar parts.
I think that was actually how they recorded this. I think they went in and recorded all the instruments live together. Like, they went into a room and did it, and then did some overdubs. And, I mean, this is a Butch Vig record, so this was around the time... I mean, this was right around the time that he did Nevermind. So.
Yeah, but there's like, I listen to, like, the Blue Matches albums. I'll bring that up for example. There's obvious, like, craft in your songwriting where I know you played out the songs live and then you rearrange them, you figured out how to make them better, and the first time you go in and record an album, you really make sure you're really focused on tight arrangements and making the songs as best as possible. For me, it felt like this was the first take. All right, that's it. And, like, they didn't focus much on making the arrangements really stick out. I feel there are some good ideas here that just aren't fleshed out.
Do you have any idea how old everyone was when they did this album?
Yeah, I know. You can do the math on it as well. So Billy Corgan's 50 years old right now.
Okay.
And that's right around where everybody is. I think Jimmy Chamberlain might be like a year older. But, so everyone was right around, like...
So this was
25,
27 years ago?
20, so they were like 23.
They were like 22 and 23-year-olds. Going into the studio for the first time, I could see why they wouldn't have, like, known enough to do real pre-production and, like, figure out how to really make it an interesting album.
Butch Vig should have, and
Right.
Butch Vig,
He should have known, like, hey, these songs are meandering too much. They're not grabbing people. You need to tighten this up. He should have known better.
But here's the thing, though. Butch Vig I think is a great producer, and you don't hear any of Butch Vig on this. So I think he
showed up for the paycheck and didn't care.
That's possible, but it's also possible that he listened to the band and it was like, I get what they're going for. I'm not going to change their thing that they're doing that's working for them.
I don't know. To me, based on what I read about it, this was essentially an indie release. Like, at least it started off that way. They paid out of their pocket for it. From what I read.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That would make sense. That would be why, explain why they hopped over to Wisconsin to record it.
Yeah.
But if it's an indie release, then Butch Vig is he's not on the label's dime. He's on their dime, so he doesn't care. He's on autopilot on this, and that's why there's really, like, fantastic guitar tone. Like, some of the best guitar tone I've ever heard in my life. Like, they knocked that out of the park. It sounds really good, but it felt like they focused so much on just getting the mic placement right, they forgot that there needed to be songs behind that mic placement.
I mean, it was probably recorded super quickly. I mean, especially if they were funding it themselves. And that might be the reason why then the very next record, Billy goes in
and
goes
completely
forever.
nuts.
And they go way over budget. And they go like 6 months longer than it's supposed to go. And he does the ridiculous, like, 70 tracks of guitar with all with his big muff.
Yep.
Anyway, okay.
So let's move on to the
All right, we've gone through two songs.
We've gone through two songs. This will be a long episode. Steve, do you want to edit this one?
Nope.
All right. Next up on the list, Suffer. I also forgot what this one sounds like. Please help me.
Oh, okay. I'll help you with this one. So, to me, this is the one that most harkens back to what they used to sound like. So you can find some footage out there of some of the way before they even recorded Gish, what they sound like. They were more of like a Cure type of thing, and this kind of bridges that Cure sound with where they started going for the more psychedelic thing.
Halfway between the Marked and the Smashing Pumpkins.
I think so.
I've never actually heard any of their old because the previous band was the Marked with Billy Corgan and Jimmy Chamberlain, right?
Yeah.
And they were like going for the Cure goth rock thing, and they drew black marks on their arm for whatever reason.
That sounds awesome.
Well, I saw a video of them performing on some TV show. It was some local access thing, and it was all four of the original people, and they were called Smashing Pumpkins. But this was before Gish came out, I believe. And yeah, the couple of songs they played sound very Cures-ish, and then much slower, more drawn out. So
makes sense.
And I read that's sort of where they started off. They were trying to do a little bit more of the goth kind of thing, and maybe the way music was happening in Seattle started influencing them to bring in a little bit more.
They couldn't pivot back to the goth thing until 4 albums later.
But Suffer is also, it's not like a super standout song. The only thing that I kind of like about this one is that it sort of reminds me of a little bit more of that Cure kind of thing.
Greg, to help you remember, it's the one that starts off quiet and then spends about 4 or 5 minutes being quiet and then gets really loud for the last 90 seconds.
Oh, that one.
That one.
This song is also one of the songs that's way too long.
Yeah.
It's
It's I mean, we've already covered Crush and Window Pane, so it's how many more of them are there? Okay, there's still
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So there's 7
7.
songs.
Yeah.
I meant how many more songs that start off quiet, spend 5 minutes being quiet, and then spend 90 seconds being
There's
loud?
only 3 songs that really kind of just start off immediate.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so it's the one that isn't Rhinoceros or Snail.
I'm just glad they aren't repetitive in their songwriting. All right. Next on the list is Tristessa. Man, whatever.
The song title is actually the coolest part of the song. This is my second to last because it's kind of just slow and forgettable as well.
Isn't this one also one of the up-tempo ones that sounds the same as...
Wait, hang on, let me listen again.
That's the Don't take soul as I take a...
Oh no, I was thinking of a different one.
See?
My bad.
All right. So
I'm so bad with names.
All right, so now here is where I entered into this album. I start off by listening to I Am One. I'm like, okay, this song is okay at best. It's got some good ideas.
And then it becomes your favorite.
So I'll explain it. I'll explain my thing. So I listened to I Am One. I'm like, all right, this is all right. I listened to Trap 2, Siva. All right, this is the same song.
It kind of is.
I get to Bury Me. Wait, hold on. That's also the same song. And then Tristessa is the same song as those songs, but it's later in the album, and there's some slow songs
so
in the
different.
middle, so you don't notice it's the same song until a little bit later. But those 4 songs are the same song. But because this one was later in the album and I forgot that it was the same song, I gave it some bonus points for that. So that's why it ranked exactly in the middle for me.
All right.
I put this one pretty close to the middle, but I do love Tristessa. That's it's got some of my favorite vocal melodies from the album. The I like that. That's a good hook to me.
That's
I can't not sing it through my nose.
Well,
Billy has brainwashed me. But yeah, I like Tristessa a lot.
I have nothing else to say.
All right, next up, Snail. What was this one again? Was this
When you
another-
wake up, you're away. Or when you wake up,
that
yeah, it's the other slow one.
Yeah.
I tried really hard to at least remember the song before I get to the
This
pedal.
one's very slow. This one is.
Yep.
It doesn't really.
Almost
It sort of meanders.
Almost if it's called Snail or something.
Yeah.
Which,
I get it now. Dude, seriously. It all makes sense. My world
Which,
has
yeah,
changed.
in terms of like arranging an album, if you did one song like that and called it Snail, you'd probably get a pass. Like, okay, I get it. It's the slow song. Neat. But yeah, there is a lot of songs similar to that on this album.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I put this one in the middle. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I put this one very, very low because it's just kind of bland.
I don't remember it. I've listened to the CD so many times because I wanted to at least remember it at the panel,
hard- I
so I
mean,
could like make a comment like, yeah, that one. They did this thing.
It is kind of hard with this record. I mean, to remember the titles and just remember.
Do you remember what they sound like? You know what? I'm going to be very positive when we get to Melancholy. So it's like maybe it was just a rough start. Lizzie's first album. I love Lizzie. Their first album isn't memorable. So were there words in there?
Yeah.
Throwing your life away.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I've listened to
is
this
the
album many,
epitome
many
of
times.
mumble rock.
I've listened to this album many times without lyrics, so I know what the lyrics are. And every time I bother to look any of the lyrics up now, I realize that I have been wrong for decades.
Well, I will make a comment about that though. To disagree with you, I will say one of the things that I do really like about the Pumpkins is that the vocals are mixed in with the music. So the vocal isn't necessarily the standout element. It's just like an instrument. It's
Just
sort of the same
another
thing
instrument.
It's sort of the thing that Tool does, and I feel like that's where Billy kind of loses it later on in his career, because then he sort of decides, oh, I'm going to make a choir of Billies.
Yep.
And
See, that sounds awesome.
no,
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Like, I love Billy Corgan's voice, but it's not suited for that.
Right.
And when he's too upfront in the mix, it loses that dynamic.
Right.
It
When
makes it
it's
so
too
cool.
upfront in the mix, and also he's trying his best to sing it really clean because he's doing, 6 parts together, then you just get just a bland chorus.
I am really
from
suspecting
a
that I'm
weak
going to
vocalist.
like all the Smashing Pumpkins albums that the fans hate. Like, whoa, vocals are up front in the mix. I can hear what's going on.
Yeah, but it loses his character, because one of the defining elements of Smashing Pumpkins has been, he has a pitchiness that goes on, but it's cool. Like, it feels raw and it feels real and more relatable. Like, it's just, and he jumps octaves a lot, which is really cool too. So when you take it and he, like you said, when you do it really cleanly, because you're layering on tons of other vocals on top of it, then you lose that raw feeling to it.
All right.
To me, it just sounds like he's hiding in the mix because he's not a good singer, as opposed to just
It's distinctly possible that might have been some of the justification for it, but I think it works.
Yeah, and it became so that might have been where they initially went with it. That might have been even a producer decision, but then it sort of becomes their thing, and they go with it.
All right. Well, next up on the list, Siva, the same song as
Second track,
Tristessa.
yeah.
I put
Well,
that... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Siva is the second track. Yeah.
Yeah.
I put it pretty low just because it does sound a lot like the rock songs on this album, but I feel like of all of them, it's the most forgettable.
How is it more forgettable than the other ones?
Because it's virtually I Am One Part 2. It really is.
So if they
blends
just
into
placed it somewhere else on the album, you wouldn't have noticed it, maybe?
I don't know,
Nah,
man.
it's
It's I Am One with a worse melody, I think.
But isn't that... So how is Bury Me and Tristessa not also I Am One, but worse?
Bury Me has some of the best guitars on the album.
Yeah, I like Bury Me a
I
lot
love
more.
the guitars at the end of Bury Me. We're getting ahead of ourselves. No!
Well, I'm asking a serious question
Well,
because
I just-
I don't understand the marginal difference between them. I ranked this one a little bit lower because I got really annoyed that he spelled Shiva wrong. So that was my justification for ranking it lower. Like, that's such crap.
It's with a lisp. You gotta say. Well, can I play clips? Are we allowed to play clips?
Why not?
I mean, if it's just like kind of in the background.
It's fair use because it's educational. We're discussing the music.
Right.
Education
So-
and critique.
All right, so I'll just do it real quick. So this is Siva. I think it's Siva is how you pronounce it.
Well, yeah,
So
because
it's
it's not a
just
real
kinda
word.
nah.
Siva's
Right,
not
like
a
the
real
mel-
word.
Yeah.
The melody in this one's...
That's why it's more forgettable, because it's nah.
Da-na-na.
as to where
that initial riff, that's pretty good.
This reminds me of the conversation we had in an episode that isn't out yet about me asking Kiss fans, can you explain to me why Love Gun is brilliant and Let's Put the X in Sex is dumb? This feels like the same conversation, but on the Pumpkin.
So that's the trick, is we both like that song. Yes, it's the same song over and over and over again, but it's a good song to us.
Let me. I've never heard. This is the first time I've ever even heard of this song called "Let's Put the X in Sex." But I already
That's
hate
because
it.
Kiss fans don't like to talk about
I hate it just as the title. It's stupid.
But Love Gun's okay?
No, Love Gun's a pretty. I was about to curse there.
No, you can swear on the podcast.
Love Gun is a terrible song. Also,
so my thing is, I like both songs, but both songs have terrible titles and terrible lyrics, and I can't justify this one's great and this one's terrible. No, it's the same thing. So with me and the Smashing Pumpkins, I was like, well, Tristessa isn't nearly as good as Siva. It's like, it's the same thing. This is the exact same thing.
Okay, well, what's next on the list? What do you have after Siva? Is it Bury Me? I wonder if there.
No. What is somehow there's discrepancy in these. What is next on the list is my favorite song from the album, Crazy.
I'm Going Crazy. We double-checked this on Wikipedia ahead of time.
I'm Going Crazy. The rock and roll party of this album.
Well, they mentioned that to me when I got over here when we started recording, but I didn't really consider that a song, so I didn't list it on it. But I would have put it last just because it's.
I think that's why it's ranked so low, because I also put it way at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just. It's there because it's sort of. It was Billy just being, man, I'm just gonna sit around and play this stupid thing.
Here's the thing. That throwaway song is the best cut on the album. Because there's melody. I can understand the lyrics. There's a good vocal performance with emotion. It kind of reminds me of Alice Cooper, one of my favorite artists. And it's the appropriate length for a Smashing Pumpkins song.
42 seconds.
because it doesn't go on. A lot of Smashing Pumpkins songs, at least on this album. So I'm not going to say a lot of Smashing Pumpkins songs. A lot of the songs on Gish, because I do like Melancholy.
We can say
a lot of them, yes.
Yeah, we can say a lot of them.
He never loses that tendency.
No.
He just refines it so that the songs don't all follow the exact same structure when they're 6 minutes long.
Saying a lot of them seem to meander too much and don't get to the point. And it feels like it's building to something, and then it never gets to what it's building towards.
It builds to the next song that sounds the same, and then it's for you.
Versus when I listen to a Beatles song or a Kiss song or a Thin Lizzy song, it's like build, 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 and here's the big chorus. And I'm so used to build, 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 big chorus, and when it's build, 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 nothing happens. It gets more boring. Like, wait, what?
Well, hang on now.
It's build, 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 riff, and rock drums.
Yeah, well, I'm about to say hang on now, because there's not many Beatles songs that really build, build, build. I mean, most of them are kind of like...
it's building to the chorus.
Here's a quick verse and then a quick chorus.
Right, but it builds to the chorus, is what I'm saying. It feels like it's building to a chorus that never really gets there.
It has a chorus, it just doesn't have a hook, which is what you're looking for. You're like, make me sing along to it. And
make me remember it. I'm not even asking to sing along to it. Make me remember it. That is what I'm asking. I think that is like a very low standard. Like, I want to at least remember what I listened to after checking it out 6 times.
Oh, valid point.
So I like I'm Going Crazy because variety. It's a change in things. I mean, a lot of the album does sound pretty samey, and this one is completely different.
Here's the thing: if they'd taken the song and they'd actually tracked it well and put it somewhere on the album, it probably would be pretty good. But it sounds like an obvious live take where it's just Billy just kind of.
It reminds me a lot of Alice Cooper did a lot of tracks like this, and so it just reminded me of that, and I was sucked in. I thought, yeah, this is great. All right, next on the list, Rhinoceros, the first of the slow songs that sound the same on this album. So it was a refreshing change of pace. When I first heard, all right, sweet, this isn't the same as the first 2 songs.
This isn't damn. You're like, cool. And then you hear this.
And then I realized, but this song is kind of boring. All right.
It is kind of boring, but it's also kind of a good song, too. This is one of the most popular songs by far from this record.
Yeah. Of the songs that follow this progression of build, 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 loud, distorted guitars, not necessarily a chorus, but, a rock riff, I think this is my favorite of them. I like the melody line. The she knows. I like that line.
That's one of the catchiest.
Oh yeah, I
melodies.
remember that part.
See, this is one of the catchiest.
That's probably why.
melodies of the whole
That's
record.
probably why I ranked it higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
the one that's only 2 notes.
but this is probably the best hook of the whole record, I would say.
And I think, the reason I forgot that there was the she knows part, because it's called Rhinoceros.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, is there
She
any...
knows. It's all Cockney rhyming slang.
I just wish there was a reference about, like, a rhino somewhere in the song so I would remember
You
it.
just have
It
to.
probably is that dumb thing that I literally just thought of now. It's probably something like that. I mean, I feel like that's...
Do you like Smashing Pumpkins less now? That
I actually think I hate him now.
the more that I can figure out why they named their songs the ridiculous things they did. Like, if I ever figure out why they named it Mayonnaise, I'll probably stop liking the band right then.
It's probably come.
Oh, gross. That's
I
distinctly
like
possible.
it more now, yeah.
And yet you don't like Let's Put the Ads in Sex.
No. Because it's Kiss. Yeah.
In fairness, that song, a lot of Kiss songs...
Because that makes me think about Gene Simmons' crotch, and anything that makes me think about
Well,
Gene
see, it's a
Simmons'
Paul
crotch.
Stanley song.
Yeah, it still makes me think of Gene Simmons' crotch.
That's fair. We talked about that on another episode.
Yep. We talk about Gene Simmons' genitals far more than I'm comfortable with.
Well, I'm missing out.
We'll bring you on for one of those episodes. All right, next on the list, Bury Me. I ranked this the lowest of the panel, and and here is why. What I've said before, when I got to the song on the CD, I was furious. I was angry. Because, wait, this is the same as tracks 1 and 2. This is the same song. They wrote one rock song for this album, didn't they? They only wrote one rock song and just changed, but this one starts with bass. All right, sweet. Well, it's the same song.
I do think that is an important thing to bring up, because I forgot to mention that, is that you have 3 songs back to back. One starts with guitar, one starts with bass, one starts with drums. And I think that was actually on purpose.
Right, because they realized it's the same song.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was angry. I was insulted as a listener. Are you serious? You are actually doing this? How was this album well regarded? I was angry as a listener. I felt insulted.
I like that you just repeated yourself.
Yeah.
Just like the Pumpkins.
Yeah.
I ranked this one. This was my number 1.
This is my number 3.
Yeah, I love this song. It's got, I think, the best guitar work on the album. When it gets to the end and there's just all those guitars flailing around playing, I think they're
oh yeah, that part was cool. I remember that now.
They're hooky, catchy. Yeah, and these songs, yeah, they're not singles. They're not good singles. They're sort of a journey. And as I've gotten,
Journey was catchy.
Ooh.
Although, in fairness to Journey, their non-singles are absolute garbage. If you put on Escape, the songs that weren't on the radio were not on the radio for a reason. Those are awful songs.
I brought that up sometime recently too. I don't think I've ever heard any Journey songs that weren't singles.
Right.
Well, so once they get to a certain point, in the 80s, they stop caring about the album cuts. So once you're in the 70s and stuff, they care and the entire album is good. And then once you get to their giant heyday, it's either A+ or F, and there's no middle ground. It's either
most bands, and that's why I think that's why we're back to singles territory, because a lot of music did that for so long, where you would get excited, you'd buy the record because you really liked a song you heard, and then you would listen to most of the record and be like, oh, this sucks.
Right.
I think most bands have better quality control than that. I think most bands, if you like the single, the whole album tends to be pretty okay. It's just some bands are very aggressive with, no, we only put effort into the singles. And Journey, at least in the 80s, was one of those bands.
You also have some bands, I'm a big fan of, Thursday, and their second major label record, We're All the Time, when they turned the record in, their label was like, no, this doesn't have a single on it. So then they go back, and then they wrote what ended up being their first single, and that's by far their catchiest song. So a lot of times people will put focus on a single like that because it's not necessarily who they are. So then you listen to the record, and maybe it's not completely cohesive with what the band sounds like.
Right.
And people get disappointed that way.
Like how The Who wrote Pinball Wizard because otherwise they couldn't sell their ridiculous rock opera to the label.
I mean, in fairness, that album is bad. It's a terrible album.
You don't like that?
I despise Tommy. I do not like that album at all.
Wow.
Go to the mirror, Greg.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense to say that.
I like Tommy a lot, yeah.
I'll be honest, it's pretty hit and miss with me. I think a lot of it, they get deep into their own rears trying to tell the story, and they lose track of writing decent songs.
I think Quadrophenia is a much better album. Tommy just completely loses me. It's boring. The songwriting isn't very, very good. And then Quadrophenia is just great. All kinds of awesome.
I've never gotten all the way through Quadrophenia, just because every time I try to listen to it, I get bored within a few minutes and say, I'll do this later.
Yeah.
That's fair. So, Bury Me. Any other comments?
Not really.
I love those guitars. It's great.
All right. Coming in at number 2 on the list.
Are we already at number 2?
Yeah,
Man.
we're at number 2. It's the same track as the last one. It's I Am One.
That was my note. So, yeah, this one.
That's my number 2, so that's in the right spot.
As well.
Nice.
Because it is one of those things where it starts up and you're like, oh, this is cool. This is one of the songs that I think would be a really great song if it was just a little bit shorter, because it's cool, but then it sort of goes on. And then when you have the second track that follows immediately after, that's why you get a bad impression of it.
Right.
You're like,
Because when I first put the CD in, this first song I heard, I'm like, okay, this is an all right rock song. I'm not super into the groove, but I understand that was kind of the style of the day, so I was enjoying it. It got to the solo, and there's that sweet harmony guitar, Thin Lizzy-esque, and I love Thin Lizzy. I'm like, all right. Maybe the song isn't super great, but there's a lot of albums, especially like in the 70s, they would start with like an up-tempo rocker, and then the big single would be track 2. And so
you were waiting for that big single.
And so I thought, like, okay, well, this is maybe just like the up-tempo rocker that fans of the band are really into, but they don't really play much. And then track 2 is going to be like, okay, then there's going to be the big catchy song. So I'm like, all right, whatever. But this left a pretty good first impression. We're like, okay, I'm not super into this song, but I could see this album going into some cool places, and I'm looking forward to listening to the rest. So because I came at it so positively is why I ranked it so high. And also, that Thin Lizzy guitar bit is my favorite moment on the album. So that's what my thoughts are on it.
I think overall it's a great song. It's a really solid Pumpkins one.
I think out of all the rock songs that sound the same, this is the one I'm like. I would add this to the playlist. This would be there are 3 tracks I would add to the playlist. This is one of them. This is a good song. I like it. As much as I criticize the other songs for sounding the same as this one is the best of all those that sounded. It's like comparing AC/DC songs.
Right.
They're all kind of the same thing.
Every AC/DC song, yeah.
And so this isn't as good as the one AC/DC song, but it's still good. So
of
I'll
all
give it
the
a thumbs
songs
up.
that are the same song, this is the most non-samest, right?
It's the catchiest of them. It has the Thin Lizzy guitar bits, which honestly helps a lot, and the fact that it was the first one I heard helped a lot. If it was somewhere else on the album, it might not rank as high as it does for me.
So if Siva was the first song you ever heard on this record, it would have been your second favorite.
Possibly.
Okay.
No, I probably still would have docked points for spelling Shiva wrong. I would have been pissed off right away.
So
it would have
basically,
made me hate the
what
entire
we're
record.
saying is that any of these songs, if they were track number 1, you probably would have been like, that's one of the better songs.
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Which I don't know what that says about the quality of the songwriting.
Now I want to see somebody listen to this album with Crush first.
Yeah.
See what
they think. All right, well, let's go through the ranking before we get to number 1. All right, coming in at number 11, Window Pane, then Crush, then Suffer, then Tristessa, then Snail, then Shiva, then Crazy, then Rhinoceros, then Bury Me, then I Am One, and the best song on Gish from this illustrious panel of experts and me, Daydream, another song I would add to the playlist.
Yeah, I love Daydream.
Yeah, I put this one at 3. It's a great palate cleanser, really, because like you've just spent the last 30 minutes listening to
the same thing,
to loud crashing guitars, like super heavy-handed drumming, and Billy's nasal voice. And then you just get this soft, gentle acoustic song with Darcy singing sweetly.
Which is still a Billy song, but from what I've... I don't know if it's true or not, but supposedly one of the ideas I heard is that Billy went to sing it and he was having a hard time with the pitch, so then for some reason they said for Darcy, like, why don't you give it a shot, and they liked how it sounded. But I don't know if that's true or not, because it is one written by him, and it was I watched him play it.
Yeah, you can find live footage
recently,
of him doing it.
and yeah, he was talking about how he wrote that at his grandparents' house or something. How it was kind of just about that, like growing up really young, and there's really not much to it, but and it doesn't really have a chorus either, which is it's only like it's less than 2 minutes long,
right?
But because it is such a drastic change, that's what makes it stand out so much.
So sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, this is one of the few songs on the album I really like. And I think it's unfortunate that it came at the end, because I might have had a more favorable opinion of the album overall if this was somewhere in the middle, because it was such a breath of fresh air. And in repeated listenings to the album, I appreciated it more and more. I think when I first got to it, I had such a bad taste in my mouth that I didn't give it as much of a fair shake when I first heard, like, whatever, this song sucks too. But upon repeated listens, it's got a really good melody, pretty lyrics. Darcy does a good job singing it. Reminds me of the Beatles, my favorite band, so that's obviously, it gets some pluses in that category.
Do we have like a point count of how many times you've said Beatles and Thin Lizzy? Is that something you guys should...
That's every episode.
You should just like have
that's
like
just the drinking game, is you just do a shot every time Greg says Beatles or Lizzy.
Well, with this, they had Lizzy-esque guitars at the beginning of the album. Those harmonies are very Thin Lizzy sounding guitars on I Am One, and this is a very Beatles sounding melody on Daydream. So it's relevant to what we're talking about, Steves, plural. And even though I would ordinarily get annoyed that it doesn't build to a chorus, there are enough good songs that have that kind of vibe where I give it a pass. I'd prefer if it got to a chorus, but it's still good as it is. And so rather than being unhappy with what I want it to be, I appreciate it for what it is, and it's just a good, simple little song.
Yeah, I kind of don't like it as a closing track either. It sounds the most like a closing track, but the fact that it has a different vibe, and then there's Darcy singing it, it's almost stands out too much. Like it's doesn't feel like part of the record in a way.
I actually didn't notice it was a female singer until repeated listens.
Oh my, wow.
I just thought that Billy Corgan was just singing really high up there, and the vocal production sounded in such a way where I thought it was him at first because the phrasing was so close to his vocal stylings, but that's just because he wrote it. Mm-hmm. But I didn't notice it was Darcy until probably like the third listen. But it's great. It's a great song. I like this more. I like saying positive things more. I like saying, yes, I Am One is great. Yes, I'm Going Crazy is great. And yes, Daydream is great. I enjoy saying that as opposed to like, man, just write better hooks. Like, I like when they write good hooks.
See, the one thing I'm going to disagree about is I think it's a great closer, because I think it does sound very distinct, but I don't think it sounds so distinct that it doesn't fit the rest of the album to me, especially having come into the band listening to their later albums where it like swings genres pretty wildly from song to song, especially by the time you get to Melancholy. So I think this one still sounds like a Smashing Pumpkins song, and it functions as like a really good wind down at the end of the album. Like, if you've been enjoying the album this entire time, then you've been following this ebb and flow of quiet, loud, quiet, loud, 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 quiet, loud, and then you get to the end, it's just like, all right, now it's time for everyone to calm down, and we're done, and everybody's going to go home for the night and have a nice sleep.
Dude, there's a Kiss album that does the exact same thing, I just realized. Except it does get to a chorus, but also it came out after this.
Interesting.
And Gene Simmons has gone on record as saying he's a very big Smashing Pumpkins fan and considers Billy Corgan an influence on his songwriting after hearing him.
Huh. I think a chorus would not have the way it's sequenced. If they put it in the middle of the album, yeah, this song would definitely need a chorus. I think to help it keep going. But as it is, where it's just sort of a coda at the end of the album, I think the lack of a chorus is to its benefit.
I agree.
I would agree. That's one of the few times you will get me to agree that not having a chorus in a song is a good thing. It's like I said, great track, great closer. I understand what you're saying about it being a good closing track. I think it would have helped me more as a listener if this was somewhere in the middle. Would have made me appreciate the album more, but I get what you're saying.
I would have put I'm Going Crazy in the middle if we're going for a swap up in the middle somewhere.
Well, like I said earlier, like that song, if you had actually took it and done like proper production on it and put it like in the track listing somewhere, it would have been
put it as
good.
the side A closer.
Yeah,
that'd be a good quick pause in the middle of the album and then back to.
But that's a pretty good idea as well, because then that gives it this bookend feeling.
Yep,
it gives it a nice parallel.
So that is our ranking. How did you guys feel about the ranking of the panel? Were you surprised with the results? Was anyone surprised? Does anyone really expect any of these songs not to care, but so many of these songs are samey, so many of them seem completely interchangeable, except for maybe the top two. For me, all the rest seem pretty interchangeable. I mean, I put I'm Going Crazy higher, but okay, the top two I can pretty much agree with, and then everything else, it's whatever.
Yeah, pretty
could be
much.
any of the songs.
I mean, I'm not that far off from that as well.
Yeah.
And even if you read people's comments online who talk about this, there are some people who this is their favorite Pumpkins record, but
What?
yeah, absolutely.
I could see that. Yeah.
Why?
Well, and there are a lot of people who don't like that they changed styles after this record. They really like that, going toward that psychedelic kind of vibiness, but then Billy sort of switched gears next, and he went more of the rock direction.
See, this album and most of the material on it reminds me of a local band who you go to see their shows because you're friends with them, but you don't really like their music. This feels like that. This has local band stamp all over it versus local band who I'm friends with and conveniently I enjoy their songs too. Well, this is nice. This feels like the local band who you're friends with and oh man, this song is going on for way too long. My hands are in my pockets. I'm gonna pretend I'm into this. Yeah.
Well, most bands' first records don't have the best production on them. I mean,
but it's not even production. Just the songs. Just I'm a song guy. That's my first and foremost thing.
To me, that's production though. That's that comes down to whoever's producing the record and being
picking out the best material,
the best songs, and saying this is what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and
Right, and like mentioned earlier, Thin Lizzy, a band that never gets mentioned on this podcast, had a bad first album. So, Smashing Pumpkins, also a weaker first album, but still there's great stuff to come.
But and here's the thing: most Pumpkins fans will probably rank this record at least third or fourth, at the very last fourth. Hardly anybody who really likes the Pumpkins is going to put Oceana or
Monuments. Or why am I spacing on? Yeah, why am I spacing on the first one after they got back together?
Adore?
No, after they got back together after the breakup.
Okay.
Right.
Wait. Well,
the Zeitgeist.
So
that wasn't them though. That was Billy Corgan and Jimmy Chamberlain.
Yeah.
So, and they were the only two that did anything on the record.
Right. But
so how upset
how different is that from any other Smashing Pumpkins album?
I guess that's true.
How upset are Pumpkins fans going to be with me and my opinions on this album? Because this is a new world for me. I know the power pop side project with the guy from Hanson, and I know
know that.
Oh, it's great. I love that album.
I've listened to James Iha's. I've listened to some of his solo stuff, and see, you can really hear James Iha coming out in Melancholy, because his solo records that came out in the 90s sounded very much like that kind of soft radio rock of the mid 90s, like Better Than Azra or something like that. It's so the two songs that he did write on Melancholy, and you really hear him. And
let me tell you about this side project. So it's called Tinted Windows. You got James Iha on guitar, Taylor Hanson as the vocalist, Adam Schlesinger, the dude from Fountains of Wayne, as bassist, and then you've got Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick on drums. The band is great. They only did one record, and it's fantastic.
That sounds like a weird amalgamation, but yeah, that sounds cool.
No, it's awesome.
Wasn't Iha in the Click 5 too?
No, he wasn't in the Click 5. The Schlesinger also wrote songs for the Click 5.
Oh, okay.
He wrote Just a Girl.
He is in a Perfect Circle, though.
Yeah.
But
He's properly in that band now, right? Like, I feel like A Perfect Circle had been around for 2 albums,
he
and they're
wasn't-
like,
yeah, he
James
wasn't-
Iha's in A Perfect Circle now.
No, yeah, he wasn't on when they first started. I don't. That was honestly the reason why the only real reason I got kind of interested in Perfect Circle was he was involved with it, but I don't think he really has much to say when it comes to that. It's pretty much just like Billy Howard, and Maynard.
I always pictured A Perfect Circle as basically, oh look, Tool Part 2, that's kind of neat. And then Iha joined and was like, okay, I guess this isn't quite the same. It's like if Tool played pop music, I guess.
So Tool got better?
Ooh, now
the internet is mad at us. Oh, jeez.
I mean, is anyone who's listening surprised by the statement? The guy who's like, I like pop hooks, doesn't like Tool.
Tool has some awesome hooks too, though. Tool has, I don't sit around and listen to Tool for fun. Usually, it's not. It's not really my style. But
it's kind of like homework, you know.
I respect Tool a lot, though. They're everybody in that band is a way better musician than I could ever hope to be, and just the complicated things they do with, like, you know, a song of theirs will be 5/4, then 3/5, then it'll be changing like every other measure, and just really crazy things, man. And to be able to hold that together.
The thing I've said many times, I don't think I've said it on the podcast, has nothing to do with Thin Lizzy or the Beatles, but
Two shots.
The thing I've said many times is the best guitar player on the planet is probably some dude in his basement you've never heard of playing some really complex stuff that no one cares to listen to. I would much rather have 3 chords I care about in 4/4 than a bunch of stuff that doesn't resonate with me at all. It's like, oh, look how complex this is. I think complexity is great if it's appropriate for the material, but I think some people are just so obsessed with, look how complex they are. Like, all right, whatever, how are the songs? For me, it's song first all the time.
I mean, that's a lot of things that are very complex and technical. They don't have that emotional feel to them. So if that's what you're looking for in music, I hate the whole idea of like, this is the best person that does this certain thing.
Right, it's like, who cares? Like, I like Rush not because of their technical genius prowess on their instruments, which they have. I like Rush because, like, oh, sweet, they write good songs and they do interesting things. Like, the interesting things are accents.
Here's the question, though. That's an important thing, I think, to talk about, because you're talking about with the Pumpkins. Like, you like Rush, but you think all the Pumpkin songs sound the same? Because, I mean, I really think that most Rush stuff all sounds the same.
Oh, there's a ton of variety in their stuff. I
don't.
So
I
think
never gotten into Rush,
I think it's more just you maybe listen to like a couple of the songs that sound the same, but there's a lot of variety in Rush stuff. A ton. Like me, I love bands with variety. That's why I like Kiss a lot, because they change it up a lot all the time.
I think the trick with Rush is it's just like, if you listen to they really evolved their sound over time. So it's one of those things where if you listen to a single Rush album, it might all sound pretty samey. But if you listen to, you know, if you listen to The Necromancer versus what was their new Snakes and Arrows, they're gonna sound completely different.
Well, I don't know much about it. I do know that in the 80s they got very like synthy, and they changed a lot there.
Well, that's our panel. Okay. As we awkwardly transition into Rush.
Rush, well, naturally that's how
there's a lot of crossover appeal between the two bands. Yeah. I'm sure.
I'm Canadian. I'm never gonna opt out of a conversation about Rush. Let's be honest.
I mean, they're a great band. So that's our show. Steve, where can we find you?
Well, we can. Oh, other Steve. Oh yeah. Now that other Steve's here, I'm Peaches.
Nobody's gonna know what that means,
right?
You could find me at my house or somewhere else. I have nothing to plug. I have nothing to do.
You're in a band. You're in a
I
good
know, but
band.
we don't have anything out yet. I'm in a band called Eye for None, and
Send them to your Facebook page or something. Give him a like.
Facebook.org/Steve.
He knows how to write good songs. I've heard him.
They're mostly all Smashing Pumpkins covers.
Oh,
That's true.
Greg's gonna be the first guy there. No, I got some music coming out. The band's called Eye for None, and I do like the Smashing Pumpkins.
They've got videos of themselves recording. If you want to watch those, they're on their Facebook.
Yeah,
I've seen
all
them.
I have, just videos of recording currently.
and if you want to check out his old band Blue Matches that he was in with Steve, you can check them out on those albums. They're great. They're catchy. They sound nothing like Smashing Pumpkins because the songs are distinct. So,
Well,
and also he's on a Lipstick song.
we do have sort of meandering lyrics, though. I kind of feel like Smashing Pumpkins kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of the lyrics are pretty vague and.
Those are some of the songs I skip.
Oh, it's fine.
I mean, but like,
And we have a ska song like the Smashing Pumpkins.
Smashing Pumpkins have a ska song?
No, I don't think they do, but that would have been tremendous.
that would have been great. Although, in fairness, on your CDs, I think there's maybe like one or two skips. So overall, you guys knocked out of the park.
I'm reasonably sure that.
But Gish is better because you don't skip anything on it.
Yeah.
I'm reasonably sure the band, the Machines of God, that their concept album was about, was actually a ska band. So ska band starring, gaunt and tall Billy Corgan.
I want to hear Billy Corgan do ska music now.
Pick it up.
I like how Billy Corgan, even at 50 years old, he still sounds like a newborn baby. That's really the biggest appeal. And I will be seeing them in a few months.
Nice.
And you won't be there because apparently you don't care anymore.
I
You
mean,
have no soul.
I've never actually seen the Pumpkins live.
Oh man.
But I've always gotten the impression that I would be greatly annoyed. But like some of my favorite bands are bands that I recognize are great in the studio, but not good live.
Oh, they're great live. But when I saw them a couple of years ago, Jimmy Chamberlain was playing drums though. And it was two other people. But Billy Corgan is just, he doesn't want to be doing it anymore. He doesn't want to be playing those songs because he even made a comment of the show we were at where, they were playing most of their newer stuff and nobody gave a crap. And then he went into playing like Butterfly Wing, or I don't know, just one of their older songs. And then people jumped up and he was like, "Oh, of course you guys care now." He was so angry.
That sounds great. That is at least that would be worth the price of admission.
Yeah, I kind of want to go now.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
I actually, everything. Grumpy, curmudgeonly Billy Corgan does sound like it'd be a fun experience.
That's him.
Yeah, at their peak, like he was a mediocre performer who like couldn't sing the songs. I've heard a bunch of live recordings, and Billy has always been a terrible live vocalist.
He's fine.
Now, are Smashing Pumpkins your favorite band?
They're probably not my favorite band.
I like how both of us opted not to do our favorite bands on this podcast.
Well, just because I think it would be way harder for us to find Our Lady Peace guests.
And as far as Beatles, I'm sure we'd be stricken off YouTube immediately.
Right.
That was one of the things I was saying. Like you can't even like.
We can't even
think
just
about
like
the Beatles.
can we just fair use discuss the quality of them? No,
No, you can't even speak Paul McCartney's name. They immediately find
unless
him.
you pay $2,000 for a meet and greet.
Yeah.
If you say his name backwards 3 times into a dark mirror, he'll come out and stab you.
No, he'll just come out and like play a song.
But I do like.
Well,
that.
my guitar gently kills.
That's George Harrison.
Yeah, it's George Harrison.
I don't care.
It's still Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney, he's not real anyway, right?
Right, he's
died a
been
long
dead
time
for
ago, yeah.
decades.
Right, but that fake guy made a lot of great tunes.
He did, but he's not
Fake
real.
Paul McCartney and Wings is a great band.
Yeah.
I really wish he would have just like his newest album he comes out with should be called Fake, and then just put it above his name.
Right, just put the other guy's name.
Yeah.
Who's the thing that replaced him? Sir Francis Bacon?
Kevin Bacon, for all I know. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, there's like a specific person that they think replaced Paul McCartney, right? Or is it just some body double? Okay,
just somebody double.
What an
yeah,
underdeveloped
yeah.
conspiracy theory.
No, I mean
No, it's a whole documentary on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on it. But so we were trying to do the sign off. Steve, do you want to sign us off?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Steve. I think he was talking to you, Steve. Actually, you want to sign us off?
No, I was talking
No,
to you,
you.
Steve. This is your episode.
Thank
With
you.
the guest that I booked.
Thank you, Flying V Steve, for being with us. We're Lipstick. You can find us at lipstickgeneration.com and wherever lipstick is sold. And check out Eye for None. Check out Lipstick. We will see you next week, except we won't see you. You will hear us next week.
You're gonna do video though. Next week.
No.
I make no promises. And scene.